Dana Mak is back for her second go at our online demonstration. She did a fantastic job last time talking about an introduction to wax casting and wax carving. And in the last episode, she ended up with some rings that we were going to send off to the casters, and she's got those back. And now we're going to see how she's going to polish and clean those up. So Dana, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for joining today, and mostly to thank AJS for inviting me back to speak again. So, as Peter said, a couple of weeks ago, you may have joined my class on wax carving and the basics of wax casting. So what I did in the background, behind the scenes, is I actually carved 2 rings out. So they are sterling, and they were cast in sterling silver. Now, I've actually had 2 casts today because I'm going to be showing you 2 different ways that you can clean up your rings. Now, the first method I'll be showing you is the method that you can use at home if you don't have any elaborate and fancy tools. Now, I won't take you through the tools list to begin with. I'll just show you as we go along because there are a few that you'll need. Now, this method is the one that you'll most likely be taught in most of your introductory wax carving classes. And the second ring today, I'll be cleaning up just with the industry standard. So I'll be showing you how to use a handheld power tool, so a micromotor with a bunch of radial discs and polishing buffs with a 2-step polishing regime as well. So we'll get started on the first ring. So I'll take you through the very basic method first. So this will be good for you if you're just starting out, if you're saving a little bit of money in order to invest in all of the fancy tools in the long run. So on average, it takes, 2 to 3 hours if you're first starting out to clean up a ring like this. The first thing you'll notice is that the rings have a little nodule on them, which is called a sprue. So this is basically where your ring was attached to the wax tree before it was cast. Now that has to be removed first and foremost. So what you will need for this is just your jeweler's saw blade. This is a super fancy Green Lion saw frame. They're about $78 or $80. You don't need a fancy saw frame at all, but you will need some blades for metal. Now these are slightly different to the ones that you use for wax. The blades go in one direction, so they're a zigzag shape and they're meant to point down. So you've got to make sure that you put your blade in the correct orientation and that you tension your blade as well. You should hear a high-pitched sound if it's in properly. If it's wobbly, you will risk cutting in and marring your metal in places that you don't want to mar it. So the way to know if your blade is incorrectly is it will be smooth when you're running your finger down it, but if you lightly run your finger the other way, it should catch on your skin. So first and foremost, we will remove our sprue. I am using the flat side of my bench peg here, and you want to get close enough to your ring shank to remove as much of the sprue as possible, but you don't want to get that close that you'll mar it where you don't want to. So all I'm doing, I hope you can all see that, I'll bring it up to the camera after we've removed it, is you're just making your first cut on that sprue, and you're slightly going to be rotating the ring as you move around. So you're keeping your saw blade in a forward motion, and you're just rotating the ring as you're going around. Sorry, this is making a little bit of noise. Now, it's important to keep all of your offcuts of metal. Obviously, they're valuable. You might not think it, but in a couple of years, if you do this all the time, they will be worth money. So I collect all of my sprues and all of my filings. Whoops, broke a saw blade. Fun times. It's always important to know how to change one. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so you're just going to undo your hooks here. Okay, I knew that would happen. It always happens when you've got a crowd watching. And I've got my new saw blade here, so you sort of can see after a while which way the blades are pointing. So I've got them pointing downwards. Okay. So I'm just going to pop that in my frame. Oops, here we go. These are a bit tricky to tension. The frame is quite rigid. It's not an adjustable frame. So all you have to do is just slightly press the frame in and then pull back. Whoops. I'm absolutely failing today. Right, we'll try that again. If you have an adjustable saw frame, it can be a lot easier starting off with. Okay, so I'm just pushing in and then pulling back, and that's got your high-pitched sound that you're after. Okay, so we are ready for action again. I'll just gently make my way into that sprue and continue cutting all the way around. So it's important to keep your blade straight. Now, when you get to the end of the sprue, your metal will start, the saw on the metal will start to make a different sound. It becomes more of a dull, lower pitch. Okay, so that sprue is now removed. Okay, now the next step, I'll just show you. So that's where our sprue has been removed. You can see that the metal is a slightly different colour there. Now all I'll be doing is I'll be taking my flat file on the coarse side. You place the ring on your finger nice and securely. So I've just got it between my index and my thumb. And you're going to be running this file in one direction only, so in the forward direction, all the way around the sprue. And that's going to be removing all of that extra metal. So it's important that all of it is gone. So I'm just going in one direction first, and then I'll flick the ring around and catch the sprue from the other side. Okay. So that sprue is now removed. It doesn't matter if you file over the rest of the surface because we're going to have to do that anyway. Now, depending on how clean your wax model was, you're going to get back two different kinds of surfaces. You'll get either a surface that has a little bit of lines and striation through it, or you'll have a completely smooth surface. Now, if you have these lines on there, we go in with an 800 sandpaper on a sanding stick, which I'll show you shortly. Now we'll start off, that's the wrong one. So these are really cheap. You can make these at home. You just get pieces of wood from Bunnings or your local hardware store, and you basically wrap emery paper around it all the way, and you secure it with some tape. So you're basically making your way around the outside of the ring with your 800 filing paper. Now what you'll notice is that some of the lines might actually be deep, and what I like to do, which is the case with this ring, is I prefer to actually go around my ring with the flat file on the fine side to actually remove all of those deep lines. So that's what I'll be doing. And then we'll follow that up with the 800 filing paper. So as I said, if your waxes are super clean and they're perfectly finished before sending off, you won't have to do this, but I'm showing you the long way just because it's valuable information. Okay, so I'm just working my way around. I'm keeping the file nice and flat. And as I'm going onto the metal, it's on an angle, as you'll notice. And I'm just rotating the ring around. Okay. Now it is tiring. I remember after my first cleanup class. It took about 3 hours and I was beyond exhausted. So if you're looking into doing this as a hobby or even full-time like I am, you'd want to actually invest in power tools because it will save your brain, your back and your shoulders and your wrists actually. I've got RSI from doing this too much over the years. Okay, so I have gone over the surface with the fine side of my flat file. You can see it's nice and shiny and most of the lines have been removed. Now I'm going to go back and actually file the surface with the 800 sanding stick. It is extremely labour intensive, so if you're starting out, you probably wouldn't want to clean up more than 2 in a day. Okay. Now, a lot of the polishing compounds that I'll show you that are on the market have the ability, because they're pretty coarse, to actually remove some of these fine lines, but we don't have the luxury with this method, so you absolutely have to make sure that all of your lines are removed, because anything that isn't removed here will be apparent at finishing stage and you'll have to actually backtrack, which isn't always ideal. Now, if anybody does have any questions along the way, feel free to ask. I can't actually see any of the commentary, but Peter will be able to shout out and interrupt. I actually do have an Instagram, Madam Mak Jewellery. It's madam.mac_jewellery. You'll be able to contact me there afterwards if you do have any questions of any sort. I'd always be more than happy to help. Now, this can be quite abrasive on the skin. Now, I'll show you in a moment what you can actually buy to prevent from damaging your skin and breaking it, because believe me, your fingers will bleed if you do this too much. I'll just finish this off first. As I said, it does actually take a while. I've just flipped the sandpaper the other way. Sandpapers come in different qualities as well, I've noticed. My previous batch was actually really good, but I find that this one's actually it runs out pretty quickly. So I have to replenish it pretty often.
Is there a brand that you prefer, Dana?
I can't actually remember the brand. Let me double check. No, they never actually have the brand on the back of the paper. It just tells you what grade it actually is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I bought this one as a multi-pack off eBay, and yeah, it's not the greatest. You live and you learn. Yes, I'd run out and I did an emergency panic buy, so ended up buying a multi-pack.
Now, Dana, I do have a question.
Yes?
Darren has asked, how long does it take to complete a ring? So how long would that process take you? If you're first starting out, you're looking at least an hour and a half to 2 hours, I'd say. It's a long process, especially this way, which is the long way. It's probably about half an hour if you do have all of the power tools and all of the radial gadgets that I'll be showing you in the next segment. So yes, prepare for some intensive labour because it's extremely tiring, as you can see. Sit back with their cuppa and their scone and watch you do
I
all
know.
that. Yeah.
They're all chilling with their popcorn and their chop tops, and I'm working hard over here. So yeah, you can see it does take a while to get all the lines out. But yeah, look, the next segment I'll show you how to do it in a more efficient manner, which is actually less strenuous on the body. But yeah, this is what you'd expect to get taught in just your basic wax carving class. This is how I was taught when I went to class earlier in the year. So we've almost removed all of the lines. I'll hold it up very shortly. Now, if you do find that your skin starts to get sore, you can actually buy this product known as Alligator Tape. So you can basically just wrap your fingers in multiple layers of that, and that just prevents your skin from all of the abrasion. But, you know, I do find jewellery injuries very satisfying because it means I've been working hard.
Now, Dana, we've got another Dana on the line. There's Dana Lee.
Okay.
And she's got
Sure.
a question. What grade of paper did you use there? From
So I'm using 800 grit sandpaper. If you do actually have deeper lines, you can use a 600 grit as well, which is slightly more coarse, which is probably what I could have done today, but I don't have any ready to go. So start with 800 and then work your way up to 1200, which is your polishing, your pre-polishing step.
No worries, thank you.
It's a good idea to actually label your sanding sticks with the grip that you do have.
Gee, that's organised.
Oh, I did this last night. I thought, I don't want to miss anything. As you can imagine, there's a lot of tools that you need. All right, so we are actually almost nearly there. So it should actually take on a really nice satin finish at this point. Okay, so I'm going to call that done on the outside at least. Now the next step is to actually slightly work harden your ring. So during the process of casting, your rings can, your silver or your metal can actually soften due to the heat. So you need to be careful that you don't overhammer it, because if you hammer down too hard on it, you will potentially change the size. So you're just going to give it a light tap on one half, and then you're going to flick the ring over and hammer the other half. It's just a very gentle tap with a solid heavy hammer. Whoops. Just like that, and then you have to check the size as well, just to make sure that that's even on both sides. So we are running at about an 0.25 on that side. You must flick it around and check that it's running at the same size on the other side. Okay, so the outside is semi-done. The next step is to actually work on the inside of the ring. So for that, I'll just get the right grade of paper. For that, I have a round stick with the 800 grit emery paper wrapped around it. And I also have what's known as a crossing file. So we're going to use this to remove the metal from the inside of the ring, because when you're making a flat band, it can actually be a little bit sharp on the finger. So this will actually make it more comfortable for the wearer if you remove the metal from the inside of the ring to sort of round out the inside of the shank. So the first thing I usually do is actually go in with the cylindrical filing paper. Now, why is this? Let me go the other way. Okay, let me just try and prepare that. Right, excellent. So all you're doing in no particular direction is you're just going to be working the ring around the mandrel. And it's important to pay attention to the inside of the ring. Just because the wearer doesn't see the inside doesn't mean it shouldn't be perfect. So the casting technique can actually bring up all sorts of very fine imperfections. So it's important to remove all of those. Now, it can be quite exhausting doing the cleanup, so the cleaner your waxes are, the better off you'll be. Now, what I'm showing you today actually doesn't just apply to cleaning up raw castings. This is also suitable for somebody who's just soldered a ring together from wire or sheet and is ready to clean up. So all of these processes apply to cleaning up raw castings and just cleaning up rings made using the traditional method.
Now, Dana, I've got another question for you.
Yeah.
How do you tell if it is hardened enough? That's the question.
So normally on the mandrel, it'll start to have a high pitch ding, ding, ding. So when the metal hardens, the pitch of the metal changes. So as you're hammering on the mandrel, it's kind of a deep hammery knock, but as the metal hardens, you get a high pitch ding sound. So that's when you know it's hardened. And it gets to the point where it doesn't actually increase in size anymore either, if you're looking at sort of stretching a ring open and stuff like that.
Right. Thank you very much.
It's okay. All right. So I've just worked on the inside. There's a bit to go. So it's important to sort of change hands as well, just because it'll sort of just get stuck in place as well. So if you can use both hands, please do, because it's probably a lot easier on the body.
Have you got any fingerprints left?
Oh, look, barely. Between soldering and doing all of this stuff, not a lot. All right. Sometimes it's good to actually run it up and down and then twist it around. It just really depends on the inside of your ring. Now we'll just have a check of it. So that's starting to smooth. Oops, I've just got to close these notifications. That's sort of starting to smooth out on the inside. You can see it's taken on a nice shiny finish. Now, if you do have any deep lines, which I happen to have one here, I actually go in with a coarse half round file. So you'll see it's rounded on both edges. One's more flat than the other side. Now, you don't want to go in too heavy-handed with this because you will affect the size potentially, but all you want to do is just go in gently and just work your way along the sides of the line. Now I've got a, what cut is this? It's a Swiss number 2, so it's pretty coarse. So all you're doing is you're just running in a forward direction only along the line in order to actually remove it. So that's done quite the job. And then I just rotate the ring the other way just to even that all out. And then you go back in with your sanding paper just to smooth it all out. Okay. There's my puppy. He's being very behaved today. All right. Now the next step is to go in with that small crossing file that I showed you before, and we're just going to be removing the inside rim of that metal just because it can be sharp on the finger. So all you're doing is you're going to have your ring on an angle, 45 degrees, and you're going to be taking your file, placing it on the inside and just moving in a forward direction. And you should just see that the metal starts to take on a rounded effect. I'll hold it up to the camera, but it might not actually be too visible. And you're going to do that on both sides as well. Okay. So this just creates a bit more of a comfortable fit. Not everybody does this, but I prefer to, especially if the band is wide as well. They can tend to cut in on both sides of the finger. So it's important with all of the files that I'm showing you today to only put pressure in the forward direction and not backwards, just because you will actually blunt them that way. Okay. So this would take me a lot longer in the real world. But we're just fast forwarding slightly, just so I don't bore the lot of you. It's just to give you a rough idea. So even though this ring might not be perfect at the end, it's just to give you an idea of all of the steps involved. Okay, so I'll hold up the ring to the camera very shortly. I probably should wear glasses, but yes, I have to go to the optom, get them checked. Okay, so I'll hold up the ring. You're looking at the top surface here. I don't know if you can see a whole lot, but the inside has started to get rounded out. compared to that side, which just has a sharp edge. So I'm just going to repeat that on the other side. Okay. Now, you don't always have to stick with your sanding sticks. You can actually just roll up sandpaper in your finger. It just gives you a little bit more maneuverability as well. Okay. So the crossing file has done its job. What I'll do now, so that's smoothed that inner surface out on both sides. Now what I'll do now is I'll just run it over the sanding stick one more time. Okay. So I'm just rotating it and moving down the mandrel. Okay. And then I'll be getting our flat sanding stick to take off the sharp edge. So you're just running your ring, I'll just move back here. You're just running your ring up and down the sanding stick. My desk actually has some little arms that come out, so they're pretty handy for keeping all of the tools flat. So it's important to work on the edges as well, just slightly. If you overfile here, you'll remove that inner lip that you've removed, that you've added, I should say. Okay, so we've got smooth edges. The inside is smoothed out as well. The next thing I like to do is I like to just go in. I've got a huge piece of filing paper here. I like to just go in with 800 filing paper again, just around my finger, and I'm placing the emery on an angle and just filing that section on the inside of the band, just going with its shape and rounding it out.
So just on that, Dana, I've got another question.
Yeah.
Are there different levels of files, as in sandpapers?
There are different grades, yes, certainly. So you can get, so the lower the number, the more coarse it is. You can find sandpaper all the way up to 5,000 grit, but for most jewellery purposes, you're starting at 800 grit and working your way up to 12 or 1500. Now with the radial discs that I'll be showing you in the next segment, they go down all the way to 80 grit through to about 1,000. So there are different grades available. It's just a matter of finding them. A lot of them are wet dry as well. You'll find that sometimes it's easier to actually wet your sanding paper to get the job done. And
there are different grades of files as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. There are different grades. There are different grades of your bench files. So they come in coarse and fine as well. But you'll find that a lot of files for these purposes actually are double-sided. So you've got your coarse on one side and your fine on the other. So they're pretty versatile. You just have to figure out which side is which and actually mark it before you start working. Because yes, it's caught me out a few times, I must say. Too funny. Okay. Right. So you'll see that the insides have taken on a really nice smooth surface around the rim there. And it's important to actually use your hands to feel your work. So run your finger along it. If you find any bits of metal that shouldn't be there or an area that's too sharp, just go back in with your tools. And it's always a good idea to just try it on, you know, throughout the stages of cleanup, just to make sure that it actually feels comfortable. So you always have to look at it from your perspective. If you were to wear this, would you wear it as it is? Okay, now, the next step is to actually hallmark your piece. Now, this actually leaves a dent on the outside in most cases, but what I've got is a 925 stamp. It's got a gooseneck, so that allows you to actually get into wider bands and difficult to reach areas. So I'm just going to get my little hammer. Where is it? I've actually got a really heavy but small brass hammer that I use for this. And I've got, you can't see it, but I've actually got a metal bench block, which is where you rest your ring, with a rubber sound deadener. If you don't have a sound deadener, please wear earmuffs because it gets extremely loud, especially if you're processing a lot of rings at the same time. So all I'm going to be doing is you just hold your ring still. You place your stamp down. You have to hold it very firmly, and you just give it one hard knock. So that has hallmarked the piece on the inside. I'm not sure if you can see that on camera, but there's a 925 there. But unfortunately, what that does is it leaves a little impression of where the stamp was on the front, which means you have to actually remove that again.
Yeah, Dana,
So
just with that gooseneck hallmark stamp, could you just show that inside the ring, because we couldn't see that on the...
Yeah, not a problem. So it's a bit hard to actually see.
But if you can show the tool in...
So that's the stamp, and the tool is
just
like that.
And then the tool inside the ring. So how you were doing it? Yeah.
So you basically just position the stamp like that. And then that goes on your bench block, and then you hammer down on it just once, one swift strike. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yep, that's okay. Now you can get straight stamps as well. It's really not a problem, but the gooseneck just allows you to work in more difficult to reach places and with thicker bands as well. Now,
and people are liking your brass hammer too, by the way.
Oh yes, it's cute, isn't it? Yeah, it's nice. I don't like using a big hammer for hallmarking. I just need a small one that's really heavy, so it works a treat. Now I've just got to remove that dot on the outside because that's where the stamp has left an impression, obviously because your ring was leaning on the metal block, and when you apply that force it leaves a little divot. Okay, so that is good. And the next step is to actually...
Before you go on, Dan, I've got another question. So do you do that, so can you do that if it is work hardened?
You absolutely can. Yes. You normally work harden your piece and then you hallmark it. The stamp is absolutely tiny. Yeah, it's not a problem at all.
No worries. And I've got another question. Do you need a license to use a hallmark, or can you use it on any metal and call it silver or sterling silver?
So here in Australia, you actually don't need a license, but I do know that if you're in the UK primarily, everything you do make actually has to go to an assay office to get tested and then hallmarked. Here in Australia, no, we just trust that what you're buying is indeed, you know, an honest transaction. Yes, so we don't actually really have any laws that really cover that. But yes, personally for me, it would be absolutely criminal if I sold, you know, something silver that was gold plated as solid gold. So you'd have to be a pretty terrible person to do that. But yeah, we're not regulated here with hallmarking as far as I'm aware. But in other parts of the world, especially the UK, they certainly are. They're not allowed to actually hallmark their own pieces. They have to get tested first. Now, having said that, if you actually do ever buy something and you're not certain of the metal content, irrespective of whether it has a hallmark or not, it's actually a great idea to get it tested by a professional jeweller. So they've got all of the X-ray machines and all of the acid testing kits that they'd be able to tell you what your metal composition is. So I hope that answers that question.
No, that's great. Thank you.
That's okay. All right. So that looks good to me. So we've done the inside of the ring with 800, the outside with 800. It's comfortable and smooth on the inside, and it's hallmarked already as well. The next step is to just go over all of those areas with 1200 filing paper. So once again, we've got our sanding sticks. I'll start with the outside. Okay, so I'm working with a 1200 filing paper. So I'm just working my way all the way around. So we'll do the outside, then the sides, followed by the inside. And then I'll just take you through the basic polishing steps. Plus we might add a little fancy feature at the end, which transforms a basic band into something a bit more classic and timeless. All right, so we're just doing a 1200. You'll know immediately if you've missed a spot. So I'm just flipping the ring around.
Yeah, this ring, are you creating this ring with anyone in mind?
No, not at all. It was just for fun, really, Peter.
Yeah. So it is your size then?
No.
Oh, okay.
Look, I might donate it to someone. We'll see how I feel. It was just for the tutorial. Didn't make it in any particular size. If I were to pass it on, I'd probably actually clean it up much better with all of my professional tools. Yes, it's amazing the difference you can get when you actually invest in all of your power tools and your polishing compounds and buffs as well. And we'll compare the two rings at the end and you'll see exactly what I mean. All right, whoops. So it should start to take on a really nice semi-matte finish. Now you can actually add texture to your band. This is already work hardened, but if you were going to do that, you would basically be adding texture in its soft state, and you'd have to anneal it in between, which is basically the process of softening the metal again. But that won't be part of this demonstration. This is purely just for cleanup. But yeah, the possibilities are endless with plain bands. You can buy texturing hammers and all sorts of things. All right, so we are almost there. You can see how this is quite laborious. It's important to sort of stay in shape with the band as well. For those of you who missed last week, I actually gave the band a bit of a domed surface. It just looks a lot nicer on the finger relative to a flat piece of metal. So I'm just sort of gently rocking back and forth over that surface. Okay, we're nearly there. We've just got one little spot that needs a bit more cleanup. Now, if you start filing with your 1200 and you realise you missed a spot or something doesn't look quite right or there's a surface abrasion, you must backtrack to 800 or something a little more coarse and then work your way back up to 1500. Okay, so this is almost ready on the exterior. So that's looking nice and smooth on the outside. We're just going to run the ring on the 1200 sandpaper again on the edges. So we're just running up and down. You just have to have a firm hold on it. Okay. You always just have to check that it's doing its job. All right, so that looks nice and smooth on the outside and the edges are nice and smooth as well. The next step is to go in with a 1200 sanding stick and you're just going to be running the ring up and down the mandrel in no particular fashion. Okay. So you do have to press down a little bit as well.
So I've got a question for you, Dana.
Yep.
Becca's asked, why do you use 1200 for the sides?
Well, you have to smooth out the sides as well. I like to finish it using the same sandpaper. It's just an all-over finish. It gets the same finish if you use the same grade as well.
So earlier on, you were using a coarser grade, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So the whole idea is you go from a coarse grade, you do the inside, the outside, and the sides of the ring with a coarse grade. So I used 800, and then you repeat that with a 1200. So the 1200 will basically take out any marks and give it that super smooth finish.
Yep, I'm sure you've answered Beck's question.
Okay. So that is done. What I do like to do once again is just get some 1200 filing paper now. That's not on a mandrel. I'm just going to fold that up. I'm just going to run around the inside of the band, following that contour that we removed with the crossing file. So this is just smoothing it out on the inside and giving it a nice shine. Okay. Swap over. Now, I work in the air most of the time, as you've probably noticed, but if you need a bit of extra stability, you can pretty much use your bench peg as well. So just rest your arm or fingers wherever you need to. There's no real rule, it's just whatever's comfortable. Okay, so that is all nice and smooth on the inside. You'll see it's got a nice shine on the edge and on the inside as well. The next step is to move on to polishing. So we're not using any polishing compounds in this segment, but I'm going to show you how to polish it using a brass brush and some Scotch-Brite. So for the inside of the ring, I normally use a Scotch-Brite, and you're just running in a single direction all the way around the shank. That just gives it a semi-matte finish. And on the outside, you wouldn't believe it, brass actually polishes silver when you've actually got a little bit of detergent. My mind was blown. I couldn't believe it when I first started silversmithing. I thought surely brass will scratch everything up. Well, no, it doesn't. It actually has the opposite effect. So here is a bucket I prepared earlier. There's no real easy way to demonstrate this, but I hope you can all see this. Yep, I think you can.
Well done.
So, the ring. I've just got some detergent. It's important when you're using a brass brush to make sure that you've always got detergent on your brass brush. And the reason for that is if you don't have enough detergent, it will start to scratch your surface up, and then you'll have to refile it again with a 1200 filing paper. So all I'm doing is I've just got a bucket with some detergent in here. I'm going to take my Scotch-Brite. I'm going to soften that sponge and place a little bit of detergent on there. And all I'm doing is I'm just placing the Scotch-Brite. Oh, I might need a mop after this. I'm just going to run the Scotch-Brite all the way around the inside of the band. And that will just give it a nice semi-matte finish. Okay, so I normally go around about 10 times, just in one direction. Okay, I'll just do that a little more.
Just while you're doing that there, Dana, I've got another question for you. How do we search for companies who do the processing of wax models to the metal product, so the casting people?
Right, so depending on where you live, you just type in casting services or investment casting, and that should bring up a few hits on your Google search. So there are multiple companies around who will cast your waxes. I use Apex Investment Castings. They came highly recommended by my jewellery teacher. They have an office in the city in Melbourne, and they also have a head office in Burwood. So you basically drop off your waxes and they cast them for you. There are plenty of places around. It's just trial and error.
If you do need some tips on that, if you ring your local AJS showroom, it's 1300 852 999. I'll put that in the comments. They'll be more than happy to give you some direction there.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll just dry my hands off. So the first step was just using the Scotch-Brite on the inside of the ring. So that just gives it a nice, semi-matte finish. Hopefully you can see with the reflection of the light. And then for the outside, I'm just going to get my brass brush wet. You can use a brush, or you can actually use a piece that goes onto a machine. I find this is quite comfortable on the hand, so I'm going to use this. My brass brush is just looking a bit sad. I might have to get a new one soon. So I normally put detergent on the ring. My bucket has detergent in there already. And what I like to do is, in one direction, you're just running over the ring, pressing down on the brush, on the ring, sorry, with the brush. You're running in one direction. Okay, so I'm just rotating the ring as I'm going.
Yeah, Dana, I've got to say, you're the most glamorous cleaning lady I've ever seen.
Well, I was going to say, Peter, I shouldn't say this on live TV, but I'm the least domesticated goddess you will ever find. I can cook jewellery, but I cannot cook a meal to save myself.
Well, you can't be perfect at everything.
You can't, you just can't.
No.
So yes, I cook the jewellery at home, and the girls fortunately are happy to feed me most of the time. But when my sister walks into my room on the weekends when I'm busy working, she says, "Breakfast for the Queen." So we do have a little bit of a comedy act here. I do get labelled as lazy, but I do work 80 hours a week, which the girls forget sometimes. My mum's just popped her head in and given me the look of dismay. She's nodding. She's doing these ones. All right. So you won't actually achieve a super high polish with the brass brush method, but it does give you a semi sheen. I'll hold that up in a minute. But you also want to get the edges of your band as well. So I normally just go in one direction around the edges. So that just shines that up. And it also catches the inner lip there as well. So that'll give that a little bit of a nice shine. All right, so that is done. I'll just hold that up. Now, if you haven't filed properly, you will know at this stage. I'll just dry it off. Okay. So this is your finished silver ring. So it's got a nice shine on the surface, but it's more of a brushed finish on the inside of the band. That is how your basic band is done. Now,
so if you show the other ring, Dana, that'll show what the before was.
Yeah, the difference. So this is the raw casting. This is the clean at home method. And this is the difference between a raw casting and your finished one.
Great work.
So I'll say it's not perfect, it's not to my standard, but for today, it's good enough. I don't want to have you guys here for 3 hours just watching me file. So yes, as long as you've got the basic idea, I think we're pretty much covered for that. Now, it's fine to leave the band like this, but if you want it to be a little bit of a fancy pants, I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick to actually get the edges of your ring more shiny and to catch the light a little more. So this is called chamfering. It's chamfer. So we're going to create a chamfer around the edge of the ring. So for this, I'm going to take my fine bench file. I'm going to change my bench peg around so that I'm using the angled surface, and I'll show you why in a moment. So all I'm doing is I've got my ring between my thumb and my index, and it's going to be resting on my middle finger. I'm going to rest that on my bench peg, and I'm going to take the fine side of my file, and on a 45-degree angle, I'm going to just be removing the exterior bit of metal, and I'll show you why. It'll all become apparent. So you're just going in a swift upward movement, and you're working your way around the ring. So that's pretty much creating a beveled edge. This will give most of your basic bands a little bit of a classic and timeless look. So I thought I may as well throw this in because it actually transforms the appearance of the band. Okay, so I'm just slightly removing that metal. You don't want to have your file on too much of an angle because you'll start to just defeat all of the work that you've ever done. So you're just removing that top surface of metal. I'll just do the other side as well.
So question, won't that dull the edge again?
It does, but we repolish it and then we go through a step called burnishing. Now, burnishing is when you brush metal on metal and it gives it a super reflective shine. So I'll take you through all of that. So if your file doesn't catch, you'll get a nice shine, but we're going to run over this again with a little bit of 1200 paper and then a burnisher. Okay, so I'll just show you. I can see it very well from here. I don't know if that will show up on the camera, but you'll see that the edges on the top and the bottom of the band have a beveled edge. Now what I'll do is I'll just get my 1200 paper just to remove any little marks that's left. We're basically going to go in for a second polishing after this on the outside. So staying in line with the angle that you've just cut, you're just running very swiftly with a 1200 paper again. I'm catching the edges of the band as I do that as well. Now this is just how I was taught. It, you know, once you sort of get set up, you'll figure out what works for you and what order you'd like to do things in. This isn't set in place. There are no rules really. But I will show you what this has the ability to achieve. Okay, so I'm staying in line. All right, so they're filed, the edges of the band are filed, they've got that nice beveled edge. I'm going to go through and give it a second polish with the brass brush because we've only just touched the outside. Okay, so there's plenty of soap in this tub. Now you don't have to do this, this is just an added feature. Okay, so I'm just polishing again those edges. Okay, I'll just dry off. Right, so those edges are nice and polished again. Okay, and then all I'm doing is I'm going to be getting a tool called a burnishing tool. Now this is basically just a solid piece of metal which has a bit of a bend at the end. Now all I'll be doing, I was taught to actually do this in your lap, but you guys won't be able to see me very well. So all you're going to be doing is you're going to have the burnisher pointing towards you So the curve is pointing towards you, and you almost hold it like a potato peeler. Not that I touch a potato peeler that often, but you know what I mean?
You can imagine, hey.
And you're going to be using the very end, but not the point. Stay away from the point because you'll scratch your ring. It just defeats the purpose. You're going to be using the end of the burnisher here to just run over the metal. So you're just running back and forth, only over that edge that we filed away just before with the flat file. Now I'll only do one side here and I'll show you the difference. So you do have to press down pretty hard, but if you actually over burnish, you'll create an extra lip at the end of your metal, which you're going to have to file down again. So it takes a bit of time to figure out what kind of angle you're going to be running on, but the whole idea is that the angle of your metal lines up with the angle at the end of the burnisher here. So if you just keep steady, you shouldn't have a problem. So you're literally just scratching metal on metal. Well, not scratching, but yeah, it's burnishing. Okay. So we're just going to go around and around. It is actually easier in your lap. So when you do start out, it just gives you a bit more stability if you sort of hold it and hunch over it. We're not going to do that today. Okay. So I'll show you the difference. Like I said, you don't have to do this, but it's just an added feature. So that's the burnished side on top. And then that's your side that we haven't burnished. I might actually put it on. So I'm not sure if that's coming across on camera, but the burnishing actually catches the light and it just gives it that extra sort of feature where it becomes a bit more classic and timeless. So it's pretty much a wedding band 2.0 version. So we'll do the burnishing on the other side and then we'll call the ring complete. And then I'll take you through the steps for cleaning our other ring that we've got over here using the industry style method. Once I discovered all of the radial discs that I'll be showing you, my life just completely changed. I was mind blown. Okay, so we're just back and forth. You do have to actually apply a bit of pressure here. It's not the easiest job in the world, but yeah, I think it makes the bands look particularly nice.
So Dana, if you finish that ring to a standard that you're happy with,
Yep.
even using the next method you're going to use, what sort of price would that ring get on the, what would you be able to sell it for?
I'd probably say somewhere between $120 or $30. Yeah, just for a simple flat band. It takes about an hour to carve. It's not long. Actually, probably even less for me now, just because I've done it so much. Yeah, it's probably around $120 or $130 for sterling silver.
What would it
Something
sell
in
for in a
gold.
jeweler?
Say that again, Pete, sorry?
What would it sell for retail in a jeweler?
Oh, well, silver ones, I mean, you're probably looking at a similar price point. If it were gold, something like this, in this dimension, in this weight, would probably be around $800 or $900. So I've played with a lot of jewellery in my time. For those of you who don't know, I actually worked with one of my favourite jewellers on the weekends for about a year until coronavirus came along and destroyed everything. But I was working in the antique and pre-loved department and I just got to play with jewellery every weekend, which was my favourite job in the world. So yes, I've had a lot of exposure to, you know, jewellery and the construction of jewellery as well. So it's actually come in pretty handy in kicking off my hobby because you sort of have an understanding of what you're looking at now. So I don't actually look at my rings ever the same again because it's just incredible how they're all pieced together. It just blows your mind, really. Okay, so that is our ring. It's got the beautiful burnished edges that catch the light. I'll just try that on. So that is it. That is what you can achieve at home using the very basic tools that I have shown you.